Hello and welcome back to another video. As you guys know, my name is Dallin Anderson, and today we're going to be talking about why do we experience suffering. So let's get straight into it. Why do we experience suffering? A lot of times in life we experience suffering and we wonder, why is this happening? Like, why do I have to suffer? Why can't I just go through life without suffering? And so let's talk about why that is. So suffering isn't pointless. There's a reason that we suffer. And suffering is actually for our own personal gain. So let's talk about how that works. So there's three main categories for today's video. And of course, under each one of those three primary categories, I have subcategories as well. So why do we experience suffering? So the first major reason, the primary category that we experience suffering is purification. So again, suffering is not pointless, right? We don't suffer just because we're supposed to experience suffering just to suffer. There's a reason why we suffer. And the reason is for purification. One of the main reasons is to purify us. It's to help us lay aside those things that are creating suffering and focus on those things which bring joy, which bring peace into our lives. So really the biggest reason that we suffer, like I said, isn't just to suffer, but to purify our lives, to change how we do things and to, change what's inside of us. So purification is the number one reason that we experience suffering in this life. Now, under purification, we have a few subcategories. And the first subcategory is to change your focus. So, previous to suffering, we might be focusing on the wrong thing, right? We might be focusing on our problems. We might be ignoring God, for example, taking Him out of our lives. We might be just wasting our time doing things that aren't important. And so through the process of suffering, it changes our focus. It can redirect our focus if we let it, right? Obviously, we can choose not to let it do that for us. But if we're actually humble enough, then we're going to let that change our focus. So we might be focusing on the wrong things, wasting time, doing something that isn't fruitful, that doesn't serve you anymore. It may have used to serve you. You know, you might be doing some activity that used to bring joy, that used to benefit your life, and now it doesn't, right? It doesn't serve you anymore. So through the process of suffering, we're able to redirect, we're able to go within and say, okay, why am I experiencing this? What can I change? What do I need to focus on? What can I do differently, right? And that only comes in and through the process of changing your focus. And a lot of times people won't change their focus until they've experienced suffering, right? Because it gives you this place where you're able to go within and say, okay, well, what can I do differently? Whereas when you're not suffering, you don't really want to change. You just want to keep doing the same things you're doing, right? What is that? Newton's law, it says an object stays in motion until it's acted upon by an outside force. So a lot of times we stay doing the same habitual patterns, the same things that aren't serving us. You know, maybe we aren't being kind to other people. we're being rude to other people, we need to be more kind, more loving, more joyful. And as we do that, our suffering's going to go down. We're going to experience less suffering. So in order for us to change those habitual patterns, sometimes we have to be acted on by an outside force. Sometimes that outside force is suffering, right? Maybe we're experiencing suffering in our lives. But we aren't supposed to stay in that state, right? Life is meant to be filled with joy. We're meant to experience joy and peace. So the purpose of life is not to suffer. We're going to experience suffering in life, but really we're here to have joy. We're here to experience happiness. So suffering is really only like a tool, something that's used to help increase our growth. It's that outside force that comes so that us as objects or people, in this case, we can change our direction. We can change what we're doing. We can change our focus. So the other thing that is under purification is to test our reaction. And this sounds kind of crazy, but God will test you, right? He wants to see how you're going to react to suffering. If you take a bad attitude towards it, if you start condemning everybody around you, if you start really having a bad attitude, then that's not really a good sign. That shows a lack of humility, right? And so another reason that we're purified through suffering is to test what we're going to do. How are we going to react, right? How are we going to treat people around us when we're experiencing suffering? Can we drink the bitter cup without becoming bitter? And that's really one of the biggest purposes of suffering, is to test our reactions, to see what kind of a person we really are, because you don't know who somebody is until there's something to test who they are, right? It's been said that the true man comes out through hardship, right? So hardship reveals who somebody is. And as they're experiencing extreme hardship or suffering, it's going to be revealed what kind of a person you are, right? Not only to God, but to everybody around you. How do you handle these things? Can you forgive people? Can you move past things? Right? Can you just have a good attitude even in the midst of chaos? That's one of the main reasons that we're purified through suffering, is to test our reaction. It's pretty simple, but it's really true. We need to see, people need to be able to trust us. Not only God, but also our friends, our family. They need to be able to see that when bad things happen, they can trust you, because bad things are going to happen no matter what. It's part of life. We wouldn't really grow if we didn't experience these things, because we wouldn't be motivated to change. We wouldn't be motivated to improve ourselves and become more than we are right now. So really, to help test our reaction, bad things happen to us so that we can learn how to behave correctly, how to handle things with a good mindset. The other reason is to change behavior, right? Changing our focus, but also changing our behavior. And the reason, like I said, Newton's law, an object stays in motion until it's acted on by an outside force. A lot of times we keep doing the same things we're doing, even if it's not helping us, even if we're not growing as a person, just because of the fact that it's a habit, right? We've identified with it. It's a habit for us. So that habit, sometimes you don't change it until suffering happens. Until, now you're experiencing significant suffering. So you say, what can I do differently? What can I learn from this? That's when your behaviors start changing, right? through the process of bad things happening, you start to say, what can I do differently to improve my life, to improve my behavior? You know? So really, people want to avoid negative experiences. People want to avoid suffering. People want to avoid life. But that's not how you grow. In order to grow, you need resistance. You need opposition in order to actually grow. So instead, we should embrace opposition, not to stay in a state of suffering, not to stay with our problems still there, but to overcome them, right? To overcome those challenges and to use them for our growth, to embrace them so that we become better people because of it. So don't wish that bad things don't happen to you. Wish that you have the strength to overcome anything that comes your way, because honestly, you're just going to get stronger the more stuff that comes. If you allow yourself to change your behavior, to change your focus, to change how you react to things, right? How are you going to react? If you allow yourself to be purified through suffering, it can only serve you. It can only make you bigger and better and stronger of a person than you were before. So yeah, it's actually for our good. It's for our benefit. And it's for our progress. So yeah, changing our behavior sometimes comes through suffering. Under why do we experience suffering? Like I said, we have 3 primary categories. And under purification, which is what we just talked about, again, we have change your focus, test our reactions, and change our behavior. Those are the reasons that we, under our primary purpose of purification, this is why we suffer in life. It's why we experience suffering. And also, suffering has a beginning, so it must have an ending, right? If your suffering has a place where it started, then it has to have an ending. It's like a circle. If you draw a circle, it has no beginning or end, but it goes on continually, right? But if you draw a line, there's a beginning and an end. Suffering has a beginning and it will have an end, because it had a beginning, it has to have an end. Anything that has a beginning has to have an end. So your suffering isn't permanent either. There's impermanence, which means your suffering isn't a permanent thing. It only stays in the degree in which you haven't changed the root causes of it, right? So you can change those root causes and the end of your suffering will happen. Or maybe some suffering isn't because of you, but just because of life, right? Maybe you were born you have a harder time moving your body, some physical disability or something, right? That kind of suffering may not be fixed in this life, but it will be fixed. If you put your trust in God, it will be fixed. So even though it's really hard and you can't do anything about it in this life except for change your mindset and try to have a good attitude about it all and everything, you can take that suffering and say, you know what, this is a reason for me to focus on God, to turn to God, to have a better mindset. And ultimately, if you put your trust in God, that suffering will have an end. It will have an end. It won't last forever. So we suffer to help create change in behavior. Some suffering also is just part of life. Like I said, you may have just had something that you're born with that's hard to deal with, or maybe you got in a car wreck, something happened to you. It's not your fault that you're experiencing it. But it's still an opportunity to look to God. It's still an opportunity to focus on what you can do personally to have a good attitude, to have a good mindset, to take what you have and make the most of it, So yeah. And that's something I can talk on it a little bit, but I'm very lucky to have my physical body is in very good shape, so I can't fully empathize with people that have experienced those things. But I can tell you that the suffering that I've experienced in my life, I've been able to use it as a driving, motivating factor for focusing on God, for turning to those positive things and changing my behavior, changing my focus. So yeah, purification is one of the main reasons that we experience suffering in life. But life isn't for suffering, right? Like I said earlier, life is for joy. We're here to experience joy. Suffering is that thing that helps actually bring joy as we overcome, right? As we overcome those problems in our life, we're able to use that suffering as a way to become more than we were, and that brings joy. But the purpose of life isn't to suffer, it's to experience joy. That's the reason that we're here. Now, under category number 2, we have knowledge. So, knowledge is another reason we experience suffering. Because we gain knowledge through experience, right? We gain knowledge through both positive and negative experiences. If we're experiencing something positive, we can learn from it. If we're experiencing something negative, the same is true. We can learn from that thing. So knowledge actually comes through experience. And experience isn't always positive. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to learn what you want to experience and what you don't want to experience. Right? If you've never tasted salt before, how can you explain the flavor of salt to somebody else? But somebody that's experienced the flavor of salt knows what it tastes like. The same is true for us. If we want more knowledge, we need to learn from those negative experiences and positive experiences, and we can't learn from either of them unless we've experienced them. We have to know what salt tastes like. So yeah, knowledge is one of the most important reasons that we experience suffering, is to gain knowledge, right? And under knowledge, I have 3 subcategories: experience, right? Like I said just now, we can't experience growth without experiencing experiences. We need to know what it's like to have good and bad experiences in our life. And that comes through direct experience, not through hearsay. We have to know for ourselves, right? And so knowledge comes through experience. These two really feed into each other a lot. And under this, we also have discernment, because it's not just what you've experienced, it's also your discernment, because you need to be able to determine what is good and what is bad, and what caused that goodness and what caused that badness, so you can experience more good, less suffering, and more joy, right? And that comes through discernment. And discernment is created through life experience. So knowledge, we gain knowledge through suffering, through overcoming our challenges, not through the suffering in and of itself, but what the suffering creates, what the suffering leads to, which is more experience, more discernment, more knowledge. If you keep the right focus, you're going to get all of these things. As a result of your suffering, it's going to benefit you. All things will work together for your good. But you can't determine, unless you have your own personal life experience, what's good and what's bad, right? You need to know for yourself what's good and what's bad. The other thing is stretching. So this one, also goes along with knowledge. Stretching is like, what's a good way to explain this? Stretching is one of those ways that we're able to expand ourselves. So, like if you take a rubber band and no, that's not a good example. Let's see here. If you take like a piece of silk and you stretch it out and you keep stretching that piece of silk out, eventually that silk is going to stretch out to a point where it doesn't go back, right? Where the silk is stretched out and it stays bigger than it was before. Well, the same is true for our knowledge, right? As we gain knowledge, our minds expand and we're able to see more than we could before. And it's almost like there's no going back, right? You're able to see from that higher plane of understanding. And as a result of that, your mind, your understanding is stretched to a new capacity. And it stays stretched out. Just like if you were to take fabric and pull on it enough, it's going to stay stretched out once you stretch it out hard enough and enough. So through experience, through discernment, and through the knowledge that comes from suffering, we're stretched, like we're actually stretched. And we don't go back to that same place because we have a higher level of awareness, of understanding. We see things from a different plane of understanding than we could before. And that makes it so that we're able to understand things that were hidden before, that we couldn't see before, because we're at a higher place. If you're up on top of a mountain, you can see everywhere and in all directions. But if you're at the base of that mountain, there's probably trees everywhere and you can't see very far. Now, that's not to say you can't go back. You can't go back to a place of not understanding things. You can. You can gain tons of light and knowledge and truth and then lose it all. And then go back to a place where you're blinded by your own sin. So it is possible to de-stretch once you're stretched. But that momentum makes it harder and harder as you go. So it works in your favor. And yeah, you can go back down to the bottom of the mountain and stop being able to see, but why would you, right? Once you're up at the top, it's so nice up there. The idea of going back down seems crazy to you. You know, why would you turn back? So, yeah, stretching out your mind, and also suffering stretches you out. You know, it just stretches you, puts you in places where you think you can't handle that kind of suffering, or you can't live up to this kind of thing you're supposed to do, but you just do it and you realize, oh, I can handle way more than I thought I could. And you're stretched from those experiences and you become smarter, you gain more awareness, you gain more life experience, and you're a better person for it. So stretching yourself out through suffering, if you allow it to teach you, is going to take you to a whole new place. You're going to be able to understand things that you never could see before. So yeah, that's under knowledge. We have experience, right? You need to experience things to gain knowledge. Discernment, you have to be able to discern if something's good for you or if something's bad for you through your own life experiences. And then stretching, you need to stretch yourself. You know, you can't. The path of least resistance only works with water. In life, you do want to take the path of least resistance in certain things a little bit, but don't be afraid of getting stretched, right? Don't be afraid of life stretching you in ways that you weren't expecting. Don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone and push yourself a little bit. Do something that's new, different than what you're used to. Stretch yourself. You know, as humans, we shouldn't always take the path of least resistance. There's times where that's okay, but we should stretch ourselves a little bit. Sometimes that comes through suffering, because a lot of times we won't do it of our own motivation, even though we should, right? The best way to do all of this is to improve yourself before the suffering comes. There's some suffering that's unnecessary, that you don't even need to experience, that you can completely sidestep by doing certain things, you know? But other suffering is there just because of life, and it helps us grow, helps us focus on what's really important. So number 3 is resilience. So under resilience is kind of like stretching. It's actually similar to stretching. So under resilience, we have LED light, which I'm going to explain in a second. LED light. And yeah, we'll talk about the other ones in just a second. So resilience is super important, right? We need to be able to handle things. Emotional resilience is the number one characteristic of wealthy people, right? People that experience a lot of financial growth, people that can handle a lot of economic fluctuations. These are people that are emotionally resilient, right? These are people that have cultivated emotional resilience, and almost anything that happens to them, they don't care, because everything works for their good, right? It helps them have a better attitude. Everything that happens improves them. And it doesn't matter if they fall, if they get put in prison, it doesn't matter what happens to that person. If they have emotional resilience, they use it as a way to grow, as a way to improve themselves, right? So you need to have emotional resilience to be successful in life. Well, emotional resilience comes from your life experiences. So yeah, let's talk about the LED light. So an LED light, if you take an LED light and you connect it directly to a 9-volt battery, that LED light's going to fry instantly, right? The light will burn out. Why? Because there's no resistance. There has to be resistance in the circuit, otherwise the LED light burns out. Well, the same is true for us. One of the reasons we experience suffering in life is because we're just like the LED light. If we don't have resistance, we're going to burn out. We're going to just completely burn out. So in order to build more resilience, we have to have resistance. That's what helps create resilience. So just like how an LED light, if there's too much power, there's no resistance, we're going to burn out. If we don't have any suffering in life, if we don't experience anything that slows us down, we're going to burn out, right? We're just going to pop. You should go look up a video, LED light burnout, and you'll see it explode because there's too much power going through it. You have to have resistance for that LED light to stay lit. The other thing is anti-fragile, right? This is under resilience. So a lot of times people don't realize that as people we can choose to be anti-fragile. This is a choice that we make. Because some people choose to have a bad attitude, so everything that happens to them that's bad, it just reinforces their bad behaviors, their bad attitudes, and they keep doing bad things. Other people choose to have the right mindset, the right focus, and through bad things that are happening to them, instead of them being more fragile like glass, they're anti-fragile. It creates strength. It fortifies. It builds strength. And so as people, through consciously choosing to have a good attitude, all the bad things that happen to us can actually build us up, make us stronger. So instead of viewing yourself as some fragile object that could be broken if too many bad things happen to you, change your attitude, your perspective, your focus, then all of a sudden, instead of anti-fragile, or instead of being fragile, you're anti-fragile. Bad things happen to you and you grow. You become stronger. You become better as a result of it. You let it drive you to a whole new level of success and peace and joy. So yeah, we could become anti-fragile through our focus. And then patience. So another reason we experience suffering is so that we can increase our patience. So it's an opportunity, it's an invitation for us to be more patient with people in our lives, with life events, with whatever is going on in your life that's hard to deal with. You can let it make you more resilient. You can let it make you more patient. Or you can let it teach you how to be, not make you, right? It's still up to you. You have to let it teach you. But if you let it teach you, then you're going to become more patient through bad things happening to you. And you're able to just say, you know what? This bad thing happened. There's a reason for it. What can I learn from it? What can I change? You're more patient because of it with yourself and with other people. And yeah, so patience is the result of emotional resilience. And emotional resilience comes through the right attitude towards suffering, not just from suffering, right? You could experience suffering your whole life and not change if you don't let it change you, if you don't let it teach you. So it's still up to you. You have to choose to change, but it can teach you patience. It can teach you resilience, and it can teach you how to grow, how to reinforce yourself and be anti-fragile instead of fragile. So yeah, why do we experience suffering? Resilience. Under resilience, we have LED light. If you have too much power, an LED light will blow out. You have to have resistance. Anti-fragile, don't view yourself as some fragile object that could break. View yourself as somebody that can grow through anything that happens. Anything that happens to them, you're going to grow from it. You're going to improve yourself. And then patience, you need to be able to be patient with yourself and with others. That comes through emotional resilience, which comes through the right mindset towards suffering. So yeah, that is why we experience suffering. It's not to suffer, it's so we can have joy, right? It's so we can have peace. It's so we can have enlightenment. It's so we can improve and become better. So we can learn how to focus on God. So yeah, that is the purpose behind suffering. Thank you guys for tuning into today's video. If you want the information about today's video, you can go ahead and take this. It's in the description box below. It has everything we talked about on a list, so you can take notes from what we learned about today and apply it into your life. So I love you guys. I appreciate you. Thank you for tuning into today's video, like I said, and I'll see you in future videos. As always, peace be unto you.